Assalamu alaikum. Hopefully, you'll be doing fine. In today's session, we will be looking at some of the important aspects of this module, that is management or managing the global environment. Already, we have discussed this in this class, but I would like to share a recorded session with people who might have not been able to attend that. We have looked at globalization in different ways. Especially, I'll focus on some of the most important aspects of the topic on global world. Especially, we're looking at why companies go global. Of course, we're looking at some of the aspects of what exactly globalization means. And finally, uh, two important topics, that is how companies should go global, this three-stage model, and once we are in the global environment, how to manage. Are there any frameworks? A couple of frameworks. The distances model and also the Hofstede model is available. Let's quickly focus on why companies go global. Most likely, we're looking at the for-profit world. The companies want to expand their sales and growth, money, profit. These are the major drivers for many companies. And in a globalization class, we were looking at the phenomenon of globalization in terms of the expanded sales companies usually have across the globe. We were surprised to know that most of the German, Japanese, United States companies tend to have their revenues beyond United States. Their own countries are now saturated markets for themselves, and they want to expand sales by entering into new markets. So the basic theme behind globalization is to expand sales. But we have seen that the organizations might want to focus on other benefits, other reasons for going global. One of the major reasons in the last 50 to 60 years is the phenomena of offshore companies, where you are focusing on getting things done beyond your national borders in other country where perhaps cheap labor is available, or as a infrastructure is available, so that it reduces your cost in many ways. Also, that raw material perhaps is easily available. For example, we've seen that countries like Bangladesh, India, where the cotton is in abundance, the companies might want to shift their production houses there so that the raw material is cheaper there. Or most likely, you have seen that most of the production house has been shifted to China, where the cheap labor, abundance labor is available. And definitely, China hosts a purposeful sector where the infrastructure and technological infrastructure is very sophisticated. At times, once you jump into a new market and you see variant new customer needs, you are able to offer new products and new services, maybe a new flavor of your product, where you are meeting the needs of that particular area. Of course, the world is becoming a global place in many ways. We have heard about the future of the WTO, that is World Trade Organization, where they wanted to create a harmonious single space for all, where lesser restrictions. Many people believe that is a way multinational companies trying to grab the world, but then it has its own pitfalls and challenges. Provides global opportunities where countries like Pakistan and developing countries be able to expand their sales by entering into European and other markets. But once you are in the global environment, you face global pressures, which are immense beyond the pressure of the local environment. So you're dealing with global suppliers, dealing with global competitors, course, you're also capitalizing on global customers. We could see top-notch organizations in their expansion, and we could easily visualize that many organizations want to jump into global operations because either they are forced because of the competition or because they want to capitalize certain opportunities that are there. None of the organization perhaps be able to be parallel to this one, Walmart, because world leading retail or retailer it is and has business across United States and across the globe as well. In almost all continents, it is there with around 100,000 associates and 300,000 uh, associates across the globe, and uh, that is expanding all the time. Of course, facing stiffer competition from companies like Amazon, but perhaps people believe that Walmart perhaps has made this world as a saturated place. The next market might be Mars, where they will be launching soon. Joke apart, Walmart perhaps is known for its global operations and its cost-effective strategy to manage things has been pioneer in terms of information technologies and global trends. Of course, we want to look at the types of businesses that are there. So there are domestic businesses, there are international businesses. It varies from their level of integration into a global business. Most probably, a global business is synonym of a MNC, a multinational business, where it operates from its head office, but has operations in other countries. So the primary operates it from one country, but has operations in others. So a multinational basically is more a centralized business model in globalization. And for globalization, a company needs to go beyond national border. So the rise of the supranational stuff is there, where company looks for opportunity. And once we're looking at opportunities, there are very interesting examples that are there. This company was selling wood and wood pulp, Finnish company it is, and was selling wood and wool pulp in across Europe, one of the biggest exporters of that. France, perhaps one of the major destination to this company in Denmark, England, United States. But then suddenly they realized that the next wave is that of the telecommunication and the rise of the cell phones could accelerate that. So it became the developer of that infrastructure services so that people now recognize this company as Nokia. So strangely, it was selling wood and wood pulp, but then now it is one of the major industrial player in telecommunication. Though it had a setback because of the rise of the smartphone, but at one time it was one of the leading company in the world with the maximum revenues. Nestle, again another example of globalization, world leading phenomenon company where it is one of the best food companies ranked one of the best food companies in the world. Perhaps Nestle and globalization as synonym. It started in Switzerland, Swiss company it is, and then expanded into United Kingdom and in the world has operations around 100 plus countries, including Pakistan, and is known for its quality products. And most of the top-notch organizations, therefore, could easily be classified as global organization. Though we're looking at might be looking at European Union, but because of the restriction of time, I would like to focus on how companies could become global organizations. So the three-stage model we discussed in the class was there. The process of becoming a global organization, the process of internationalization. We have three stages. If you look at stage one, this is a passive response. Least risky options are there. You send your products to the other country um, through exporting. We bring other countries products, companies' products to your country through importing. Is safe as possible because your brand and your company perhaps is not kept going there, and you are basically not facing these stiffer challenges of establishing a unit around there. Perhaps Many people believe that you take up the stage one options, then shift stage second option, and then stage three option repeatedly one after another so that you don't face major failures and challenges. So people recommend that the process goes from stage one to stage two to stage three, and therefore least risky options are available in stage one. More riskier options are in stage two, and then major riskier options are in stage three. So eventually, you are alone going into another country, being a foreign subsidiary, which is establishing your unit there and process and manage your things stand alone without the help of anyone. So from uh, uh, color wise, if you see that you go blue, you should go blue and go to higher ranks, you are facing more in your brand and your equity and many more are at stake. Your products and services, your reputation perhaps at stake at the most. So you start with exporting and importing, where your products been bought by independent people who are not particular partners to you, and they are trying to sell your products on your behalf, earning their profits. Whereas in stage two, you look for foreign contractors, foreign representatives who could get this done on your behalf. They get to tend to associate with you and therefore more riskier than just importing and exporting, and therefore your brand name and your overall reputation is at stake. For example, in Pakistan, many companies in Sialkot are developing sports goods for companies like Adidas and Nike. And once they do something bad, like child labor or anything else, they directly affect the reputation of big companies like Nike and others. That's perhaps one of the recent cases been. So a foreign representative or contractor is therefore a close partner to a company, a provider, a sourcer, and therefore it is more riskier than the journal exporters and importers. By stage three, you could start lending other companies your name, your brand name, so that they be able to manufacture on your behalf, or in case of services, be able to render services. So in the services world, this phenomenon is called franchising, whereas in the manufacturing world is called the licensing. There are multiple ways a company could uh, license franchising, and there are a lot of modalities in this, especially in terms of how the profit will be shared between the two, how they will be able to share information regarding the technology or the formula or the product mix. A lot of variation that is there. Now you're not going yourself, at least in stage three at this point, but allowing others to use your brand name. Once your brand name is profoundly written on the company billboards, so therefore people recognize this as a parent company of yours. For example, in Pakistan, many licensees are using Pepsi Cola brand name produced on the behalf of the Pepsi Cola. So people recognize them as part of Pepsi Cola. They don't differentiate much. But it is basically a licensee, an organization who takes responsibility of the major losses, of major issues. The company therefore is not directly responsible for any major losses. But then repute is at stake. The two options at the top of it, strategic alliance and joint ventures. These are partnership ways through companies expand by linking to other organizations in terms of short, smaller projects, or maybe joining hands to become one and merge or take over other companies. So once you do that, you are dividing the risk with another partner, also dividing your profits in many ways. Many companies need to use this model a lot, expand and grow into the global businesses. Finally, the companies could go foreign subsidiary. That is, they become independent in terms of launching their own products and services, and therefore establish at their independent status as alone. Many companies need to follow the route and therefore be able to achieve this finally and eventually. Totally depends upon your ability to take a challenge, risk, So if you're risk takers, you could clearly jump from the first stage to directly stage three. And if you have ample money, most likely you will like jump to the foreign subsidiary. But many recommend that the organization should follow these stages from stage one to stage two to stage three. Of course, jumping into globalization means global challenges. Organizations might be facing a lot of issues in terms of political, economic, and environmental influences because countries tend to vary in terms of their norms, habits, and practices, also in terms of their infrastructure and availability of resources. So, we're looking at international management functions to be applied. Culture is one of the aspects of that. If you look in class series culture of loopers, the companies committed during their expansion and they moving to another country. And most of these were based on language, but also in terms of cultural and social differences that are there. So, how to manage in a global environment? We have two models that are available. The first one is the distances model. We're looking at distances, or in simple words, differences in terms of culture, administration, geographic, and economic aspects. For example, if you have a similar language, it's much more easier to operate around there because people already know the words, slogans, languages that are there, and it's much easier to establish uh, commonalities. But if there are different languages are so apart and different, the languages have their own jargons or their own ways to explain things. So therefore, there might be huge cultural differences in the two countries. So if you're comparing your home versus your host, where home is your startup and host is the way the country where you want to expand your uh, business, then you want to see whether there are similar languages or there are differences. Similarly, in terms of natural resources, some countries are very remote, would have land access, so you may be using water or airspace to transport things, so cost multiplies, and therefore much more different as far as the pricing and costing of the products is. Whereas in other countries, you might find two countries connected to a same border, and therefore transportation might be that easy. So it totally depends on how you see uh, your country and a home and host country may differ to each other in terms of these elements. For example, a small country versus a large country. A large country has very different dynamics than a smaller country. Might be location-wise easily available, and your logistic cost may be minimum as possible in a small country. But if you jump into a larger country, you could find additional costs that are there, certain restrictions in certain areas that hinders your progress in many ways and will bring up new challenges. So it prevents a useful analytical tool where you're comparing countries in terms of these aspects and be able to manage things based on that. Very useful model, Hofstede model. It explains the importance of cultural differences that are there and develops a comparison based on five versuses. That is, the first one is how the country look at individualism versus collectivism. We already talked about the United States versus the Japanese. United States people are more individualistic in nature, where Japanese are more collective in nature. Whereas we also looked at the power distance, where power distance people are close to the power or not. So power distance might be small, maybe huge distance from the power. Whereas uncertainty avoidance may be there or may not be there. So risk taking versus risk avoidance. Whereas the country may be focusing on quantity of life versus quality of life, where quantity of life is focusing on status, money, and symbols like these, whereas quality of life is associated with the relationships, care for others, and many other aspects. So there are five verses, finally long-term versus short-term orientation. Based on these differences, very useful analysis already available. You see, Australia more individualistic, power density is small and little, country avoidance is moderate, quantity of life is strong. People believe in money, status, and uh, effort for status. Whereas if you look at Pure Central Europe, like Greece, very collective in nature. Power distance is large, density void is high, and quality of life is moderate. The useful mechanism it is, it helps us compare countries and their values based on the differences in the people, how the people believe, what they believe, and what they act to or they react towards. And then, because the national cultures tend to have a influence on people in terms of customers, but also in terms of employees as well. So this model really helps and guides us to compare our home versus any host country where the companies want to expand and grow at. I hope we have got some insights about the global world. There are a lot of furthermore aspects and phases to globalization, but for the sake of the upcoming paper, I think this is more than enough, at least a briefer on many aspects, and I hope it could really help you in your cause.